Can you afford to live in Amsterdam, or is it destined to be just a dream? My friends, Amsterdam is a city famous for its canals, bicycles, coffee shops and the red light district, but also for emptying your pockets faster than a child at a candy store. Let's be honest, as a person who lives here, I need to say that Amsterdam is quite expensive. Before moving here, you need to consider having a solid financial planning. And how can you do it? Sometimes knowing what is going to be your wage is not enough, because maybe you are not aware of the expenses. That's why I created this video in which I will analyze all the top expenses. I will start with the rent, then I will talk about groceries, I will talk about going out and entertainment, I will talk about transportation, and I will talk about beyond maybe this simple cost, make some scenarios and tell you how expensive is really this city. Hello there! We couldn't start this tour of the expenses of Amsterdam without starting with the rent. This is my apartment. I live here together with my girlfriend. We pay 1,700 euros. If you add on top of that bills, you arrive to 1,900 euros, about 2,000 euros. So if you split in two, it's about 1,000 euros each, little bit less. It's a lot, but it's not the highest amount you can pay here in Amsterdam. For example, the apartment where I was living in the Pipe and was during COVID times, I used to pay 2,000 euros plus expenses. And now I think for the same apartment, you can pay up to 2,400 euros. That means on average, you can consider that in Amsterdam, you can pay starting from 1,400 euros, let's say an area that is not as nice like the Pipe, and you can pay up to 3,000, probably even more. But let's say you cannot consider less than 1,500, 1,400 euros if you want to live alone or you want to share the apartment with your partner. It's very important to know that you can also go for other options. You can choose to live in a city nearby, or you can go even, let's say, to Den Haag. And I know that in Den Haag, for example, you can have a studio for maybe 800 euros, something near that, because I have a friend who is living there. But the best is that when you consider to move in Amsterdam and you consider maybe to live in this city, you take in consideration that at least 1,500 euros of your salary will be spent every month on the rent. I would consider that expense as really important for your financial planning. The rent is the largest expense to consider when moving to Amsterdam. But of course, after the rent, one of the most important expense is groceries. And about groceries, of course, it depends in which supermarket you do the grocery. Today, I will do it at Lidl, just because I'm near Lidl. I usually go to Dirk van der Broek. And of course, if you go to Albertine, you have a different price. So also in that case, please consider, I don't know, 10 to 20% difference in price compared to what I spend. As we are a couple from Puglia and Calabria, we couldn't not take panzerotti with burrata and duja. So we have spent about 140 euros, 138, and in two for a week. Usually we spend between 100 and 120, something like that. It depends if you buy more or less. And of course, if you change supermarket or you buy other stuff, you can spend less or more. We buy quite a lot of stuff, but of course that depends on what you eat, how balanced is your diet and so on. But about 100 euros per week in two persons, so 50 euros each.
The next day.
I have shown you how much you could pay to do grocery here, but it is very important also to specify that how much you spend and if you can afford or not living here depends also on your life habits. You can go out, for example, every day, have dinner outside, breakfast, go out, drinks, and the amount you spend is considerably different than if you do a lot of groceries and you spend a lot of time at home. So because of this, I want to show you how much it costs on average at breakfast. So I'm gonna go to have breakfast, a dinner, maybe also a drink. Of course, you can add to this cinema, going out, clubs. I will put some prices to give an idea. Being a capital, here in Amsterdam, you have plenty of choices. So also the prices and places I show, they are more or less average, but then you can go up to a more expensive place, and then you can go down to a cheaper place. The croissant is super good, but of course, if you want to go for a cheaper option, so for the croissant and the other sweet cake and the 2 cappuccinos medium, we paid 19 euros, so about 10 euros each. If you want to go for a cheaper option, it is still possible. For example, I love Alberto Pozzetto in the Pipe, where you can have croissant and cappuccino maybe for 4 euro or less than 4 euro. So this is to say that if you want to go for a fancy option, this is an option at Claire. If you want to go for a cheaper option, you have still an option. And of course, how much you spend depends on your life habits and your preferences. Here, what I say, compared to the price, I don't like the fact that if you want to sit, is not as comfortable as it should be for the price you pay, because the counter is very fancy, but I would invest some money in having good tables to sit inside. Outside there are, but inside there are not. And in winter, I think you have to have inside. You may wonder how much it costs to go out in Amsterdam, because there are several stories that here everything is super expensive. I must say, going out is quite expensive, also if I compare to Milan, but it's not as expensive as you may heard. And tonight, for example, I'll bring you to see how much it costs to have a dinner, not street food, but something you see, not too fancy, but something average, let's say, how much it costs. Of course, that depends also on how much you drink and these kind of things. I'll show the menu. I'm not much of a drinker, but you can check it out. We paid 56 euro, not too much, in 2 people with drinks and dinner. I'm exploding. The dinner was one of the best I had in Amsterdam. The restaurant is super good. That's why we had almost 1 hour queue to eat. You cannot book. So I think it's very good. It's a good deal. It's not that expensive, about 27 euro each. So I think it's good.
The next day.
Another expense to consider, but I consider it a minor one, is transportation. Why I do consider a minor one? Because in Amsterdam, you can live just biking. I don't like public transport. I biked always. I had a normal bike, a standard bike. Now I have an electric bike. I move everywhere with it. And most of the people here just bike. So maybe you can consider, I don't know, a flat tire or some issues with the bike, like 20, 30 euros per year. Or maybe 50 if you're unlucky. And once you cover that, it is basically for free. If it is electric bike, maybe some electricity consumption, but that is already covered in the rent plus expense overview that I did. But if you still want to go with the public transportation option, here the tickets of public transport is quite expensive for tram and for metro. So you find here below the price for a single ticket. You have also some subscription options, but still I think it's super expensive. And for the size of Amsterdam, for how small it is, I don't think it's worth it, but still you have the option. So you can consider maybe this expense on top of the full overview that I will do at the end. As I promised at the beginning of the video, now I will make 2 scenarios of how expensive it is to live in Amsterdam. First expense we talked about is the rent, and I would quote that between 800 euros minimum and max up to 1,500, but let's stay on average and say about 1,000 euro per month. Then let's talk about grocery. I would say also on that minimum 50 euros per week up to maybe 80, but let's say 60 euro per week, so about 240 euros per month. Third expense is going out, breakfast, dinner, drinks, and you can spend a very different amount on that expense. I would talk about going out maybe once a week for dinner, and then you can pay from 30 to 70 euros. Let's take an average of 50 euros per week. So that means 200 euros per month in total. And the other expense is transportation. As I said, I bike, so I don't consider that expense at all. But if you want, for example, to use public transport when it's raining a lot, maybe you can consider about 20 euros, 30 euros a month of bus tickets or tram tickets. So about nothing. We can also avoid to consider that expense in the total amount. If we sum up these expenses,
A few minutes later.
if we consider these two scenarios, I would say that you can go from 1,200 euros to a really high amount. But let's say I would consider at least 1,600, 1,500 euros fixed expense to live here. And then of course you can go up. It depends on your life habits. It depends on many drivers that we said before. But this provides you an overview of how much you can spend. And as I said, there is a big difference. You can spend really a lot and almost nothing. It depends on your life habits. So probably from this video, what you have understood is that Amsterdam is quite expensive. That's true. If you're looking for a luxury destinations with low cost, Amsterdam is not your cup of tea. Perhaps Dubai could be. Sometimes providing just my view is not the best. So let's look at some information you can find on the web about how expensive is this city. If I read eurocost.com, I see that Amsterdam ranks 9th most expensive city in the world in 2023. So this confirms that this is a city that is for sure not cheap. But if we read why, the top reasons is that the housing, it's really hard to be found in Amsterdam and it's really expensive. Then they talk about groceries and dining. They say it's not the most expensive city in Europe, but it's still pricier than other destinations. And as an Italian, I can see that it's probably pricier than Milan. Owning a car here, it's really expensive. Not just the parking, but also the taxes on top of owning a car. Last but not least, the Netherlands has relatively high taxes. So I'm an expat. I moved here and I got the 30% ruling, which is tax benefits. But after 5 years, I will have the Dutch taxes. And if I think about being taxed without the 30% ruling, now I would be taxed 50% of what I earn. So it's really high level of tax. However, if we keep reading the article, it's important to remember that cost of life is really expensive, but also wages are really high. So sometimes if you match wages and cost, still Amsterdam ranks among the top cities to live in Europe. So I think beyond watching this video, doing some research can help getting a full view before moving here. Now I would like to leave the floor to share your experiences, because this is my view and perhaps could be flowed by my experience where I live, what I've seen. So I would like to know also what you think, above all the people who live in Amsterdam. So I would be happy if you want to share your story and also your view here below the video with a comment.